Consider This, with host Carol Schrader, is supported in part by Better Business Equipment and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hi, and welcome back to University of Nebraska at Omaha and the Milo Bale Student Center. We're located, give or take a block, depending on where you are on campus. It's 60th and Dodge. That's what most people think. 60th and Dodge, UNO. Well, if you head east on Dodge Street, just a couple of miles or so, you will run into, I would say, the newest international landmark in Omaha. Now, you may not notice it if you whiz down Dodge Street, but most people are starting to notice. It's the Mexican consulate. Long overdue in the state of Nebraska, in my thinking and the feeling of a lot of people who are Hispanic or work with Hispanics. And my guest today is the consul of the consulate in Omaha, Nebraska, the Mexican consulate. And I welcome today Jose Luis Cuevas. Thank you for joining us. You've been kind of quietly perking along in Omaha for about a half a year now.
We've been working a lot. We had to establish the office. We had to establish ourselves, and we've had a lot of work just getting the word out. Because we have a jurisdiction over 4 states.
That's
Not
right.
only Nebraska, but Iowa, South Dakota, and North Dakota.
Now, for this is, and I have looked up, had people who work with historical documents and history in Nebraska. There have been honorary consulates for various countries in this state. In other
That's
words,
right.
somebody, let's say, in fact, I know a case of a Danish man in Omaha, an attorney who was made an honorary consul, but there was no real consulate located. So this is the first consulate from a foreign country in Nebraska.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't understand what that means.
Well, it's basically a consulate is for people to be able to understand it clearly. It's like a small embassy. It's the administrative part of an embassy. It's the whole of the Mexican, in this case, the Mexican government in a nutshell. We represent the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but at the same time we represent the Ministry of Defense, we represent the Ministry of Agriculture, we represent the Ministry of Commerce. We represent absolutely every ministry in Mexico.
Kind of the conduit to all things officially Mexican.
Exactly.
In Omaha, serving 4 states.
Exactly.
My feeling, as I said earlier, that this is long overdue. Where did it originate to get this? I mean, who says we ought to have a consulate
Well,
in this Midwest 4-state area?
the Mexican government several years back made a study regarding the amount of consulates that it had at that time, and at that time it was 37. And the consulate we just opened in Omaha is number 45. So
they obviously felt there was a need for more.
We've grown for quite a while, but the consulate, when I was stationed in Chicago, we had jurisdiction over 13 states. So that was
Chicago, the state of Illinois would be just enough for a consulate, I would guess.
That's more than enough. But now, 10 years later, we have seen the need, based on immigration, seen the need on the heartland, that it was so unprotected in respect to the fact that there wasn't any Mexican representation anywhere between Chicago and Oregon or south to Denver. So that left a big area.
You mentioned the word protection, and that is a big kind of part.
In other words, there was absolutely no way of helping all of those people that live there.
Yeah, who might need, and I'm not saying protection in terms of being protected from the U.S. government, but there are legal issues where there may be no one to answer the questions.
Exactly.
For Mexican immigrants. They're a vulnerable population because many of them are illegal, and many of them are legal and are treated as a minority and perhaps a double standard, which our African American compatriots have complained about for a lot of times, some of those things like profiling and whatnot.
Yeah, right.
So they were in a sense unprotected because they couldn't pick up the phone and call someone within a reasonably close proximity.
That's right. So the whole process started with, I understand, several different organizations petitioning or getting a petition signed and sending it to Mexico, indicating that there was a need for the establishment of a consulate in this area, somewhere in this area, and it was eventually up to Governor Johans, Mike Johans, who in one of his trips to Washington was able to speak to the Mexican ambassador and push for the opening of the consulate in Nebraska.
In other words, we agree that it's needed, and not only do we agree, but we would like to have hosted here, or whatever the proper language is.
Yeah.
Be the home base.
That's right. I mean, there was two decisions: either it be stationed in Minnesota or it be stationed in Nebraska. But I think there was more of a need at this particular moment, based on immigration, that and the census reflect that we establish in Nebraska.
You could probably put it in just about any state over a certain amount of population, and the census would reflect it, the last census, because the influx of South American, Central American, and more specifically Mexican immigrants for jobs that we so desperately need filled.
Yeah.
And Americans tend to forget that immigration is a double-edged sword.
That's right.
I mean, you don't want just to open the borders to anyone in the world to come in, because we do have some issues we would need to look at domestically. But on the other hand, we have jobs that are going unfilled that keep this economy percolating.
Sure. I mean, it's there has been dire need of that, and immigration is coming. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and it's going to continue coming. So why not take advantage of the fact that an office of the Mexican government was needed and establish one at this time, so that it can fulfill its functions now and in the future.
When I was in the consulate one day, I talked to a wonderful young woman who is from Colombia, who happens to teach, among other things, Spanish here at the university. And she told of the fact that, no, she is not a Mexican, but she would visit Mexico often with her students. You know, they would go for real-life Spanish-speaking experience in Mexico. And that she would have to go to Utah or Denver or somewhere to get her visa.
Some people had to travel
Phoenix.
10 hours to Denver, maybe 12 hours to Chicago.
Just to be able to firm up a trip, which we would take for granted. We're able to bop down to Mexico.
Sure, because the airline, I mean, to American citizens, the airline is able to provide them with the tourist card, which is all they need.
So here's an example of just one woman, and I'm sure the story is replicated several times, who had to go over the years, lots of other places, spend a lot of other money, and she knew how to work the system, which not all immigrants do, but she was very educated, and even then it was very costly, a lot of time consuming, and she was so happy.
That's right.
That this was here, because it even though she wasn't Mexican, it sped up something that she needed to do to teach her students.
Well, a lot of people have been, in that respect, very happy, because they see that there was a need, and now that need has been filled. And so now they can travel maybe an hour. They can travel from Des Moines over here, maybe skip half a day of work or so, get their documents in and out of the office in 20 minutes, and they're already on their way back. Because some things you can't process by mail. They have to come in person. But for visas, people are very happy that we're here.
I'm sure they are. One of the things that I found interesting was that, I don't know exactly when this show will air, but the second week in July, President Bush was at a swearing-in of new citizens at Ellis Island. And he talked about immigration process needs to be streamlined. And he talked about the goal would be, in his mind, was for, by 6 months, people who did everything right, and could meet the legal
criteria.
resident status, that this could be done in 6 months. Because he's certainly coming from Texas, understands immigration across the border problems. And he also understands, being a free market capitalist type president, that business needs this to be taken care of.
Sure.
So I imagine you were glad to hear that.
I sure was. I mean, it's going to be kind of difficult because you're talking of a lot of people that have applied based on the law 425I. You're talking of a lot of people. I don't have the exact figures. You would have to check with INS for that. But you're talking of a lot of people. So in order to have them all processed,
That's just
in
one
6
law, one
months,
situation
yeah.
that is just recently been extended to let people who have been living here. But I mean, there's just the regular ones too on top of that.
sure.
And Jerry Heinauer, who is the director of the INS for Nebraska and Iowa, who seems like a decent sort of guy, talks about how overwhelmed they are right now. So if you say we need to speed up this process, something's got to give. Something's got to happen.
I'm sure he's more than willing to do it. However, provided he has the personnel to back it.
One thing that was pointed out to me, that we think, being taxpayers, that maybe it's good to speed this up, but that means more people, and that costs more tax dollars. And I brought that up to you, and you pointed out to me, wait a minute, when they do process these people, they bring in a little cash to the U.S. Treasury.
I don't know the exact amount that they're going to have to pay, but there is a fee involved in obtaining adjustment of
It's
status.
not like a $20 fee. It's like several $100s plus.
Yeah, at least.
So it could be, if it's structured right, and if they're able to get the people, it may be a self-pay kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, just look at it this way. Like when you travel, well, even you, when you travel abroad and come back, you're paying the price of your airline ticket, you're already paying for customs inspection on your way back. You're paying for INS inspection, and you're already paying for agricultural inspection. It's a price that it's something that's in there which is considered sort of like a tax. But
So in other words,
you're
the
already
people that are
paying for
using
that.
the service
So
generally pay.
That's the fee they're collecting for it. It's I believe that it's auto-financing.
So taxpayers shouldn't feel so affronted, because they're able to make this somewhat to a certain degree.
Yeah,
Some
to
of
a
these
certain degree.
employees are
Sure.
self-paid by
to
the
a certain
service.
degree, sure.
There was a situation out in Scotts Bluff recently where the alleged police beating of a Mexican native who had been living with his family. And I'm not asking you so much to comment on that situation because you're sitting here, but I'm sure you've been asked to comment on it. But this is the very kind of thing, and we've had other Hispanics, I don't know if they were Americans, involved in I don't know if they were Mexicans, involved in certain things over the years. This is the very kind of thing that the presence of a consulate certainly makes the Mexican population out in the Panhandle who know or are involved with this young man feel a little more comfortable that somebody's going to pay a little more attention, because there's going to be an extra set of eyes
Yeah,
on this situation.
and that's relatively close by.
Right, not
Yeah.
in Chicago or
Yeah.
Phoenix or
Or Denver.
Right,
Yeah.
and even though Denver's close to the Panhandle,
Sure.
it still is mountains away, literally.
Yeah, it is mountain away.
So I think that,
Well, that's our hope, and it is one of the hopes that we obtain here within our 4-state region, to be able to cooperate and notify all law enforcement agencies that we are here, what we are doing, and exactly what is it that we will be doing, and at the same time indicate to them that the consulate issues the consular identity card, which is a document issued by all embassies or consulates around the world to any citizen. You go to Mexico City and you reside there, you go to the American embassy or the American consulate, and they'll issue you a consular identity card which identifies you as an American citizen, and that is more than enough to identify you. So we're in the process of having law enforcement agencies accept that card as a valid form of ID.
And you don't just pop those off to people when they walk in the consulate.
No, not at all.
I mean, they have to have a couple of real valid forms
Yes.
of identification, military identification.
Birth certificate and another official ID.
Right. So
Because we posed that problem to the Department of Motor Vehicles, because we saw it was a catch-22 situation per se. That somebody comes in from Mexico, they have a document in Spanish, like let's say the voter registration card or something like
Right.
that, and the personnel at DMV
yeah, to
have
give them
no
a driver's
idea
license.
have no idea of what that document is or when it expires. So what I was able to explain to the director of motor vehicles was that this is the document we issue, which is issued according to international law around the world by every embassy or consulate of every country, and the document itself, it contains exactly the same information as the Nebraska ID.
So, were they real anxious to jump into accepting that, or did it take a little bit of explaining and kind of getting comfortable with the idea?
Probably took a little bit of explaining, probably because of the novelty of the document, that they weren't aware of it, and they had seen it, but they didn't know exactly what it meant, or they wanted to find out a little more about the safety features that the document had. And we were able to explain that to them, and apparently we satisfied them. We've also been able to satisfy the state of South Dakota to that respect, and we're still working on North Dakota, and hopefully Iowa will follow suit.
Well, Iowa is more populated than the other 3 states, so that would certainly be a target for you to be able to get that accepted. Were they concerned about, sure, maybe a consular ID would work real well, because you're kind of vouching for this people, that they
Sure.
have the proper ID, and,
Sure.
and you're a pretty credible organization there, but that it could be duplicated or forged, someone could be forging your documents.
There's no way. I mean,
Right, so you were
granted,
able to tell.
if there's a means, there's a way, right?
Right, well, yeah,
But
but that it's pretty much,
but it has a lot of safety features built into it.
and that's what you meant by the safety features.
Exactly.
That kind of like our dollar bills, we think there's some safety features
Yeah.
built into those, in our passports and
Exactly.
and things to make them the
Yeah.
real deal, and
Yeah,
people can
well,
identify them.
To start off with, the film itself, in which it takes a photograph, is only issued in Mexico to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is shipped to us. So once they take a photograph on the foreground, it indicates the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the logo of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And
In every frame.
in every
and-
frame, in every single frame. That's one of the many safety features that the document has. So they looked at the document and they eventually accepted it. So that's good.
One of the things that you talked to me about when I visited with you in your office was that when Mexican nationals, immigrants, are arrested here, for whatever reason, maybe a perfectly valid arrest, perhaps, that your presence here is making sure a little better that they have proper translations, that their basic rights as prisoners here, or arrested or questioned, whatever is involved with law enforcement, that there are basic international rights that maybe haven't been followed. I don't know about Omaha, but in certain parts of these 4 states, maybe they weren't kind of up to speed on it, or whatever. That this is.
Well, in general, they are up to speed. However, we are trying to put others up to speed in the sense of indicating to them that per international law, there is this need for notification to the consulate, notifying the individual that he has a right to speak to the consul prior to speaking to law enforcement agencies. It's like like the Miranda Act, right? You have the right to talk to an attorney. In this case, you have a right to talk to your consul.
So that would, in addition to reading them their rights in the proper language,
Sure.
they would also have to add that for
Yeah.
someone that is a citizen of
Well,
another
there have been cases that have been appealed and overthrown due to that fact, that because they weren't notified of the fact that they could have spoken to a consul.
And I'm sure the officers don't want that case thrown out later, just because, I
No.
mean, just like they're careful to read the Miranda
That's right.
warnings.
That's
and
right.
and so, and the other thing is that, are there any other reasons that a prisoner might need to call you? I mean, you certainly support
Well,
American laws and breaking,
definitely.
Burglary is burglary, and you,
Yeah,
you support
yeah.
that. You're not there to get them out of.
I mean, whoever's
Valid
guilty,
charges.
whoever's guilty is guilty. And Mexico does have an agreement with the United States for the interchange of prisoners. And we're starting to interview people in different prisons in that respect to see those who could apply if they meet the criteria. It has to be approved by 3 different agencies, by the Department of Justice, by the Department of Justice in Mexico, and then by the state attorney generals. In other words, like in this case, it might be the state attorney of the state of Nebraska. He would have to approve it.
So these prisoner exchanges, which
In other words, they exchange one by one,
one for one,
one for one.
and so those would be mutually beneficial for both countries, or the relatives in both countries, or the penal systems in both countries. But it makes it a lot easier having you
Sure.
around here to do that.
I mean, the only advantage is that he's being transferred to a Mexican prison, but he would still have to conclude his whole prison sentence, which was imposed here in the United States.
And that is working pretty well,
well-
and is well respected.
It's worked pretty well, yeah. And it's well respected, sure.
Well, that's great. You don't just work for Mexicans or Hispanics who come in and can use your services. Americans might be surprised that if they're in business or interested in trade, that they can also access your expertise.
They can
because you
access us.
represent those parts of the Mexican government that would be involved with trade.
That's right. We do, and we have already had inquiries into that respect. And for example, we also represent the Ministry of Tourism. We also promote tourism. I don't know if you've been to Mexico.
No, I haven't, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you have to. You have to go because, I mean, you have a multi variety of things that you can do. If you like beaches, you have beaches. If you like archaeology, if you like quaint, romantic places, you can find that. If you want the eternal spring, you have Cuernavaca. You have to go. I mean, it's we have so many different things down there.
When are we going to get a direct flight
I'm working on
from
that.
Omaha to Mexico? That would be the thing.
I'm working
Can you
on
see that ever happening?
Well, I hope so. I know that I've already talked to one vice president of Aeromexico, and he says due to the fact of the aircraft type that they're using, it's too big. So they wouldn't be. They would need X amount of passengers guaranteed in order to be able to, for the flight to be break even. But you have on one side Continental, which might be beneficial to them, and on the other side you have a Mexican airline, which would be Mexicana. And I understand that there's enough space in Eppley to open up a counter space for them, and there's enough space in Eppley to open up customs and immigration. So that would be great.
They already have you. They've just in the last year moved U.S. Customs out to right on the premises. So and they're anticipating maybe someday the most logical, besides a Canadian.
If you've ever
direct Canadian flight would
traveled, if you've ever tried traveling to Mexico, it's an ordeal because you have to leave Omaha, stop in Houston, run to get to the other gate, which is on the other side of the airport in Houston International, and then take off. But I mean, the flight itself takes you from the time you leave home to the time you get home in Mexico City, you're talking of maybe 8-9 hours. So
well,
you could
let's
really
do it. Let's do it.
you could really cut time down. I'm sure Mayor Fahey's well in agreement of making Omaha International Airport instead of Omaha Airpley International Airport, Airpley Airfield.
Well, it certainly is doable in terms of we have an excellent airport authority, and their plans for expansion are good.
I think that they would be, I haven't talked to them, but I think they would be in favor of it. So it's just a matter of getting the
Getting
problem
enough-
here.
Well, see, you
is
got to
getting
promote
enough-
that tourism more, and then you
I have to get enough passengers.
have to create the demand
Sure.
a little better.
Sure.
If you, one of the things that you told me early on was that maybe we're just not cosmopolitan enough, some of us, and maybe I wouldn't be either. But when I drive down Dodge Street, there are people that notice there is just one flag outside. of your consulate, and that's created not a major misunderstanding, but for some people a little, well, what's that about? And you explain to them, I mean, the bit about this is kind of a mini embassy, and if you were to go to an American embassy in Mexico, you would see
Only-
the American
Only the American flag. Yeah, also by international stature, the only flag that flies outside of foreign government representation is the flag of that country. And be it in the American embassy or be it in the American consulate in Guadalajara, the only flag that flies within the premises of the complex of the consulate would be the American flag. And in this case, it's the same thing. We've already had people come in and question us as to why is the American flag not flying there. But we try to explain to them. We will let them know exactly what we do, and I think they understand.
Well, because you are sort of an historic first in this part of the world.
Tell me about it.
It's natural to be a little surprised. Most of us in Nebraska are not, don't hang out at embassies.
Sure, and especially since we're in a very low-profile street, right? Dodge Street.
Very low profile. Thousands of cars go by.
I know.
That also brings up the question, and I saw just recently a letter in the Public Pulse in the Omaha World Herald. Why didn't you put the consulate down in South Omaha, where the bulk right now? It may change over the years, but the bulk of the Hispanic population is Mexican.
Well,
population.
there's two. I would put it this way. One, we were looking at a space down in South Omaha. However, the space that we looked at was very small, and it didn't allow us space to grow. The second one, which is probably the most important one, is that we're not solely and exclusively here to represent the Mexican people. That is one of our main functions, and it is our main function. However, we are here to promote trade, promote tourism, and that is done with American businessmen, which are anywhere in Omaha. So we have to be accessible to all parts of the community.
And those coming in from out of state, from the other four states.
Exactly. And we have to be accessible. And by tradition, it's always been the policy of the Mexican government to put their consulates close to government office.
Well, you certainly have been accessible, and we want to thank you so much for visiting with us today. The consul of the Mexican consulate here in Omaha, Jose Luis Cuevas, thank you for joining us on Consider This.
Thank you.
And welcome to Omaha. A little late,
Thank
but
you.
better late than never, right?
And you have to go to Mexico, don't forget.
Got it.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us today on Consider This. And remember to catch Consider This in stream version on the web. See you next week.
Consider This with host Carol Schrader is supported in part by Better Business Equipment and by Nebraskans for Public Television.